Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by welcoming members and officers and those members of the public watching via YouTube. County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? There's no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we will make our way downstairs via the nearest available fire exit, which is through the middle doors to my left. The muster point is in the car park to the rear of the building. I would like to extend a special welcome to Councillor Peter MacDonald, attending his first meeting of the committee. I would also like to thank John Walker, attending his last meeting of the committee. John's been a valued member of this committee and its earlier incarnations for over 20 years, and has also been a member of the investment subcommittee for many years. Thank you, John. You will be missed. Okay, we'll move on to item 1. Dawn, do we have any apologies?
We have no apologies, Chair. We don't have Councillor Bowden or Coles here yet, so they may be arriving late.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest?
John Walker, a retired member of the scheme, and my son and daughter-in-law are both deferred members.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the Chair of the Board of Directors and Trustees of Cambridge Sports Hall Trust, which is an admitted employer in the scheme. I am also a member of the local government pension scheme, but not the Cambridgeshire scheme.
Move to item 2. We're being asked to approve the public minutes of the Pension Fund Committee meeting on 30th of March as an accurate record. Can I ask if any member who does not agree with this proposal to raise their hand now? Okay, I see no objections to the proposal to approve the minutes as an accurate record, so we will take that as carried unanimously. Turning to the action log, do officers have any comments or updates?
No updates, but happy to take any questions if there are any.
Members, any questions on the action log? Okay, we are being asked to note the action log. Trust we're happy to do so. Thank you. Item 3, we've received no petitions or public questions. So move on to item 4, which is the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund Administration Report. Can I ask Michelle Oakinson, to Governance and Regulations Manager, to present the report?
Thank you. Yes, so I will run through the report and just pick out any key details from what's been published. So if I work through the report in order, so under section 3.1 on the KPIs, as you'll see on the report, there are 4 missed KPIs for the period, and this consists of 2 red and 2 ambers. So effectively, this is following successful recruitment. So as you'll remember from previous meetings, we had an issue previously actually recruiting to some of the positions in the team. We're in a position now where those positions have been recruited to, but obviously the knock-on effect of that has been the inexperience within the team, and the team now need to build up the skills and knowledge to be able to be as efficient as they can be. So we expect this to improve over time, and we have reflected this later on in the meeting in the risk register as well. Full details of all those KPIs can be found in Appendix 1. Moving on to 3.2, the actual development of the new KPIs and the supplementary KPIs. So just to confirm that this is on track, the testing has started this week within the teams. We're expecting to get some early analysis on how that is going by the end of next week, early following week. So if all goes well on that testing and there's no major issues that come out of that, the next meeting we have after the general meeting is in October. So we should at that point be in a position to start providing you with some further details on that. Next section under the IDRPs, really just a comment on this section. You'll see that the format of this section has changed slightly. So what we've tried to do here is split the table between the stage 1 and stage 2 disputes. And hopefully we've tried to make it a bit easier for members to follow in terms of the process and the member experience in terms of those IDRPs and how they link up. Particularly where there are stage 1 and stage 2 decisions within the same periods and how they feed on from each other. So the next section just to comment on is the data improvement plan. So that's in Appendix 4 with some of the detail in the report itself. So as you'll see in the plan itself, we've now come up with the data improvement plan in order to improve the data quality of the fund. There's really 3 areas really to focus on there, the common data, the GMP reconciliation and the unprocessed levers. The common data in particular is one where we will be addressing addresses where we either haven't got them or they're poor quality. But we will be doing this by quite a targeted approach as you may, or some of you may remember in the past when we've tried to do this on a bulk process, it was quite difficult to manage so many in one go. The GMP rectification has been an ongoing project now for a number of years, and that's coming to the conclusion with that now, with the 667 cases at rectification stage by the 31st of March. And again, the unprocessed levers is also an ongoing project, and Mark will pick that up as part of the business plan as well. Moving on to section 8. So in the report, at the time of publishing, there were no data breaches to report. There is one data breach to report, and this is something that what Mark will cover off in the private session further on in the meeting. So that moves us on to the last topic I just wanted to discuss on the paper, which is under section 9, the overpayment section. So really just to provide a bit more context around this overpayment and how it's occurred. So we basically use a address and mortality screening service, and this particular death was first flagged to us with a low confidence result. So effectively any results that we receive from this service that we get either a low or a medium confidence, we do not take that as being absolute confirmation that the person is deceased. And obviously with it being a very delicate area, we don't want to make any assumptions. So the next stage of this process is to send a get in touch letter. In this particular case, the reason why the confidence wasn't high was because the 2 addresses did not match. So we effectively sent get in touch letters to both addresses, which is a very vague letter that more or less just says, please get in touch with us. We don't give any level of information in those letters whatsoever. Following that, what should have happened is when we don't get any response to those letters, we should suspend the pensions at that point, either to establish if somebody has died or somebody normally, if their pension is stopped, will get in contact with us and we will reinstate that and backdate that straight away. Unfortunately, in this particular case, it happened as this piece of work was being transferred between teams. So effectively what's happened is the work has not been allocated across to the correct team. So that's the kind of background into how that overpayment has occurred. Just another note also, just to say that in the report, it actually says that the invoice has been raised. Unfortunately, it hasn't been raised yet. It's in the process still of being raised. The individual has been notified that there is an overpayment. And obviously we will be in discussions in line with the overpayment policy of how we're going to recover that. There will be a spouse's pension due, but unfortunately we're unable to do any offsetting because of all the tax implications with doing that. But we will be in contact obviously with that individual to work through this. That's all the comments I had on the report, but happy to take any questions.
Members, do you have any questions? Adele?
Yeah, I was just interested in the stage 1 and stage 2 process for the lady who, or I presume it's a lady, could be the other way around, the spouse who isn't getting 50% of the pension. And I just wondered, so it's gone to stage 2. What if that is not upheld? Well, is there a stage 3 or what's the situation?
Yeah, thank you. So the stage 1 obviously is fully concluded, and that is a decision that's made by Mark as head of pensions. So the stage 2 decision then goes through to the monitoring officer at Cambridgeshire County Council. And obviously we're pending that decision at the moment. The difficulty with this type of case is when we are bound by the regulations. So even if something or a member deems that something has not been treated appropriately, or they're feel that they should be getting something else, these cases are particularly difficult because we are physically not allowed to pay outside of the regulations. So depending on if the monitoring officer also agrees with the decision that Mark has made at stage 1, the next stage would be the pension ombudsman. So the member would have 3 years from the date of the decision to raise that with the ombudsman, and that would be the final stage of that, and then they would review the whole case. I suppose it's just useful to note that at the moment with the pension ombudsman there are quite a few delays there, so we're kind of ones that we're aware of are taking quite a while to get through that process when it enters into the ombudsman cases as well. So, but that would be the next route for that person.
Okay, thank you.
Alan?
Thank you, Alison. Couple of points. One, obviously, on item 9. Obviously, it does seem quite worrying that there seems to be certain things have not gone totally right there. So presumably, we're looking at making sure that the procedures are in place so that shouldn't happen again. I've got another point on something else, but shall I take them one by one? Yeah, sorry.
That's fine. Yeah, no, absolutely. So effectively what's happened here is we're confident that the workflow in the new team is running as it should be, and all those cases are managed on task management. What we did do as an extra precaution is we went through any other cases that within this time frame of that team transfer within a month, just to double check those cases to make sure firstly that the tasks were allocated correctly, and to see if there were any other consequences of those. I don't at this stage believe there were any more, but obviously if there are, we will feed back. It was a very small number as well in scope. So we have taken that extra precaution there just to double check that there were no other in that period.
Okay, if I can come back on that. Because it's being paid into a joint account, I would imagine if it's into an individual account, then somebody's died, then the bank normally frees the account. So straight away you'll get a pushback from the bank. So in this case, obviously it's a joint account, so that account's just carried on operating, which is another.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of our death processes, we actually have a few different systems that we try and capture death. So we've got the Tell Us Once service, we've got the screening, we've got when bank details close and post is returned to us, and obviously when individuals also tell us. So between all of those methods, it's normally pretty robust in terms of what we know in terms of deaths and the accuracy of those deaths. Unfortunately, in this particular case, because none of those other kind of flags came through to us, and as you rightly say, with a joint account, you know, that would be another factor that if that account was closed, that would trigger something for us as well. It has unfortunately continued to be paid and nobody's been aware, and obviously the spouse hasn't informed us either. So that it was particularly challenging in this case because it kind of slipped through various channels on this one.
And my second point, thank you, Chair, is around the unprocessed leaver records. We've got the backlog, and I know this has come up before. And it may not be possible. I just wondered how we stand against other pension funds, because obviously it's going to be presumably a perpetual issue where people leave employment and that they move house and everything else, so, and then don't update the fund here. So it's obviously a continuing issue with a number of people. 8,500 seems a lot, but it may be relatively small percentage of our active members, and just are we is that just a normal situation, you know, similar to other pension funds, if you understand the question?
Yeah, I do, and indeed I actually asked a question about actuary, because obviously they see the data from the majority of the funds in the LGPS universe actually, and their words were you are aligned with other funds in terms of the number. You know, it is I think it is more than I want. I don't think the number is sometimes looks higher than it actually is, and I'll just explain the reason why. The automatic system we get to receive leaver information, if there are pay awards a long time after someone has left, then they sometimes come through as effectively a new record, because they've been created as a new record on the payroll system, because they've been closed down on the payroll system already. And so, for example, last November, across the two funds we administer, we had 750 records that looked to us like leavers, and in fact they weren't. Another month we had 800 from a single scheme employer. And so our numbers at times are getting artificially inflated. And it's just about trying to get mechanisms in place to try to deal with that, including actually working with a software supplier. So I think the number is higher than I'd like it. I think sometimes it is artificially inflated, but I will, in the next, in the business plan update, I will go through some other things I'm doing as well.
Thank you for that, Mark.
Members, are there any other questions? I would like to just sort of ask one point on exactly that point 9. We obviously have an individual at the other end of this overpayment who presumably there's no reason to suspect that they did this in bad faith. And while you mentioned being in communication, have they accepted the fact that there is an issue here, and have they talked about their ability to repay that and the impact on their life that this may well have? Because I think we have to bear in mind that we are talking about real people at the end of this.
Yes, absolutely. From what I can understand from the team, where we are at the moment is the member or the individual is aware that there is an overpayment. But because we are waiting on final details from a third party to be able to let the individual know what the actual issues are surrounding the overpayment and any implications off the back of that, we effectively haven't issued the final invoice at this stage, just why they're doing a bit more data gathering on that. But absolutely, it will be a case that the fund will work with the individual absolutely find out the ability to pay this back. Part of the overpayment policy does recognise that we do have the ability to spread out overpayments, set up overpayment plans. And although the primary objective is to recover money back to the fund, we would never put somebody in a situation where it's going to cause them any financial hardship. So we will absolutely work with this individual to make sure that we can do it as amicably as possible for them.
Thank you for that. And just picking up again on the KPIs, it's a pity we're still seeing red and amber items in there. Mention around training and staff recruitment and things like this. Can we all get assurance that this is all in hand and, you know, this is going to improve before too long?
I think certainly we wouldn't expect you to see red KPIs. That's not something I want to see. I think ambers are, because of the targets we've set, which are actually considerably above the industry standard. So particularly the ones with 5 working days, that does mean that if anything goes wrong with a particular case, then it can fail. Other funds would tend to have 20 days for that kind of KPI. So that's something that we do need to bear in mind. They are incredibly tight on a couple of them, but we have hit them with green indicators over time, so we know we can achieve it. But I would like to see, I would certainly expect to see them improve over time, expect them not to be reds, but I think the occasional amber isn't inevitable.
Thank you for that. Members, any other questions, points? In which case, thank you. We are being asked to note the administration performance report, and I trust we're all happy to do so. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 5, which is the Pensions Fund Annual Business Plan Update Report 23-24. Now ask Mark Whitby, Head of Pensions, to present this report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So just in terms of the update, obviously I'll go through the executive summary and the RAG status of the various activities. This is obviously the first report of the financial year. So in terms of the financials, there's no real variation that we've reported because we were pulling this together just a few weeks after the start of the year. The outturn for the previous year, you will see the final details of that at the July committee. So the annual meeting we effectively have of the committee where we bring the annual report and accounts. So we will bring through what we believe what should be the final version of those numbers to that particular committee. In terms of the RAG status of the activities, you'll see there are 2 ambers, and unfortunately one of them is the ones you've seen as an amber a number of times, which is the processing of undecided leavers. But the principal driver of that is not the performance within the service. It's the fact that there was a change in the effectively discount rate which GAD provides and which feeds into a lot of the factors the fund uses. And because of that, there was a suspension of processing of under 2-year leavers with under 2-year service, because they're entitled to a refund or a transfer, and the transfer requires those GAD factors. And so the whole industry or the whole local government pensions industry has had to suspend transfers for a period. The factors came, or some of the factors came in last week, so we're just putting them in the system now. So we've had a few months delay. It was particularly frustrating because we had actually identified a significant number of under 2-year cases within these undecided leavers, which we could bulk process, and I just started that. So I'm hoping that we'll now be able to push forward, and there'll be some improvement in those numbers this financial year. The other thing I have decided to, I also let the chair know that we were going to be doing this, is to actually just look at our processes around this area. So we've got our benefits consultant is going to do some work just to make sure that our processes is everything they could be, and that some of the issues we've had in terms of processes is not as a result of the process we are using. And I should say these processes cover a number of areas, from the receipt of data coming in from scheme employers monthly, the way we deal with that data each month, and the reconciliations and value and validations we do, to then how it gets pushed out into teams, and teams obviously have to do some of the processing, including in bulk. So that will help me just establish that we have got absolutely the right processes. I think we've got the right level of resource, but you know, we will see. And then, you know, there could clearly be some performance concerns. And the other real issue would be the quality of the data coming from the scheme employer. So it's a whole load of things going on there that I'm just getting some assurance over. But as I say, the change in, or the receipt of those GAD factors should enable us to do some bulk processing. The final activity, which has a RAG status of amber, is the access asset pool. And the reason I've put that as amber is because we are behind on the non-listed programme. But I'll go into detail on that when we come to the access update in private session. So I think that's all I have to say. Happy to take any questions on any of the paper.
Members, over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. In one sense, Mark will hate me asking this question, and I don't expect an answer today, don't worry. Cyber resilience. I think in the entire country, you know, if we look at, I think British Airways just announced that they had a massive issue with accessing personnel. I think it was personnel data rather than customer data. This is not an easy thing to answer, Mark, but are we as confident as we can be that we won't get hacked? Thank you.
Okay. We're probably, I would say we're far ahead of most ones in the LGPS universe in terms of what we've done, in terms of the fact we put a strategy in place, undertaken data and asset mapping, sent, you know, questionnaires to suppliers, etc. We will come on to, I mentioned in private session, we have something, an update to make, but I think we've done everything we can. The majority of, I obviously can't go into detail in public session because the majority of the activity we've undertaken has been reported in private session for obvious reasons. But I think we've put ourselves as far as possible in a place where we're as resilient as we can be. I'm happy to pick up on other aspects later, and if there's anything you want obviously me to feedback on, then I can. I think I would say there's from previous sessions we can share this with you. There's quite a bit of material that we can share so we can show you what that journey has been over I'd say the last couple of years. I don't know if the chair would like to add anything to those comments.
No, just really to say that it actually is surprisingly high on our agenda to see all of this, and there are a number of items around cyber resilience that we've been looking at, including looking at the real flows, because it's quite surprising how people don't understand exactly where data is coming from and going to, and who it passes through. And quite a lot of work has been done to actually try and identify that, so we can try and pick up where there are weak spots along the way. Andy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for the report. I was just looking at 3.5 with my own procurement hat on. I was wondering whether there was some sort of falling over of systems here to not identify that this was a problem that was coming up and we hadn't picked it up, or was there another reason why we got to the situation where the address tracing mortality screening couldn't be extended? I'd just like a bit of a reassurance about what happened there with that process.
I'll say a few words and then Michelle might want to come in. I think the majority of the work the majority of procurements we do, we use the national frameworks, which are run by Norfolk, but the whole community feeds into put in things on the framework. We've also had some incredibly major procurements that have been lined up. This particular one, I think the issue has been that the framework hasn't been renewed. So that's been the principal driver to the problems we've had on it. I think we could have done better in terms of not pre-planning it, I think it's a fair comment. But I don't know if I think there was another factor in play, which we believed we had a system which was lined up, which was through the NFI and a fraud hub. But perhaps Michelle could just say a few more words around what's happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've obviously been aware of this contract expiring. As Mark rightly says, the framework then went offline completely, so we couldn't do anything under the framework, which makes it obviously a bit more of a complicated process for us. What we then started to focus on was actually the fraud hub and whether we could basically do it through internal processes and sign up to the fraud hub via West Northants and Cambridgeshire County Council. When we started investigating all the pros and cons to that, we were quite confident in the mortality screening side of that service, less so with the tracing side, which gave us one issue. The other issue was that both authorities were at different stages of being part of that fraud hub. So obviously for us, we want to keep our services consistent between the two funds. So it was another decision factor that led to the decision, well, actually, if we extend this contract for short term, another 12 months, we will then see what the new framework has to offer. We will also see what the situation is with the fraud hub, and we will have all that information available to us to make a more informed decision rather than what seemed a bit kind of disjointed at that point in time where we were looking. But yeah, appreciate that it didn't quite go the way we wanted it to in terms of timings.
Thank you. If I may follow up, but in terms of the financial costs to the organisation of this short-term thing, they're normally quite expensive. Is this the issue we're dealing with, or have you come to an equitable agreement?
So the agreement is at the moment is that the address and mortality screening company have agreed to honour their prices under the framework. So there will be no additional cost from coming away from that. It's just obviously sorting out a separate agreement to get that in place. The actual contracts itself are not actually of high value because we tend to work now on an ad hoc basis rather than a bulk basis. So it tends to be the mortality screening is obviously the biggest part of that, but then with the address tracing, it is on an ad hoc basis, and the only other costs is any death certificate ordering that we do through them as well. So,
thank you. My final question on this is, therefore, in terms of other procurement processes, obviously it's thrown up an issue about how the processes are working. Are you confident that in any other contract, you now appreciate these sort of short-term issues may come up, but you have a process in place that could deal with any other area, not just this one?
yeah, absolutely. And I think the key thing here, and unfortunately for this one, is the break in the framework contracts, because originally when this contract ceased, there were no plans to have another contract, a framework in place. We're now told there is one, December 23, but the fact that there's that break in that, obviously as a fund, it's far more efficient for us to work under framework agreements. So we will always look to do that in the first instance. So any that fall outside of that, or if we see any potential problems with frameworks, we'll obviously be a bit more aware of that in the future and be a bit more proactive in that area.
Smashing. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Members, any other questions? If not, we are being asked to note the business plan update. Are we happy to do so? Thank you. In which case we'll move on to item 6, the governance and compliance report, and over to Michelle again to introduce this.
Thank you. So again, I'll just go through and pull out some of the key topics in this report. So the first topic on there under 3.1, and obviously talking about for a few meetings now, is the pension dashboards. Not really too much further to say on this. Obviously, we've received no further updates since the government announcement to reset the connection deadlines. So we're in this period at the moment where we are just kind of seeing what we should be doing and what the rest of the industry is doing. So what we do know, and well, what we are told is the programme will absolutely go ahead. There's no question of that. It's just the consensus across the main parties involved, such as PDP, pension regulator, PASA, is effectively we must carry on with the data standards side of the preparation to be able to connect to those deadlines when we can. And what you'll see in this report, which is new in Appendix 1, we have now included the pension regulator connection checklist. So what we've done is we've started to populate that in terms of as much as we can, what we know and what we are doing as a fund to make sure we're hitting some of those areas. Obviously, as time goes on at a later point, I'll bring that back to you so that you can see the extra work that's been going on as some of that. And obviously, some of it, we're still waiting on further guidance to be able to know exactly what direction that's going to go. And until we get an actual date, it's difficult at this stage, but just to give you some assurance that we're aware what needs to be done and what we're doing in this stage. And it obviously also feeds into, as we've previously discussed, the data activities via the data improvement plan and the business plan that Mark was discussing as well. So no real update there apart from kind of carry on with what we're already doing and just kind of keep updated with things as they develop. So the next big topic that we've been talking about for quite a while now under 3.2 is McLeod. So just as a slight recap and just a bit of an explanation for our new member also. So this is effectively where the LGPS changed from a final salary to career average pension scheme in 2014. So effectively members within 10 years of their normal pension date from the 1st of April 2012 were provided with a protection, which was effectively the underpin. So this looked at the point of retirement. There was a comparison of the career average and final salary scheme, and whichever was the highest at that point would be protected. So moving on from that, there was a challenge on that, and it was determined that younger members need to be provided with an equal protection effectively. So although it will, in terms of work for us, most members will build up a higher pension than the career average and unlikely to see an increase or much of an increase. But obviously us as a fund need to be able to undertake that piece of work to see exactly who is affected and apply any necessary changes to that. So the first consultation concluded back in October 2020. So where we are now is that an additional consultation has literally just been issued. So on the 30th of May, so after this report was published, and it runs until the 30th of June. And what this consultation is now doing is focusing on the supplementary issues and the scheme regulations surrounding the McLeod remedy and based on the original consultation. So there are some elements that it is covering in terms of what it didn't feel it achieved last time on some of the areas. And then there are some areas that are completely new that they want some views on as well. So DLUC is seeking general views on areas such as aggregations, club transfers, flexible retirements, divorce. And they're also seeking some technical comments where the policy approach has been determined, but they just want some technical input on those areas. So these are areas such as the excess teacher service, compensation and interest and that type of thing. So they're also seeking views on the draft regulations themselves, as obviously those regulations need to be in force by October, so that can all be implemented effectively. And the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund will be responding to that consultation. So the next item, just to make a note or a point about, is under section 3.3. So really just a comment on this one. So this one is about the Scheme Advisory Board's Gender Pensions Gap Report. So it's one of those areas that actually, when you first look at it, you think, as a fund, how do we have any control over this? It's obviously a result of employer decisions and, you know, a member's working life. So from what we understand from this, the next steps which are referenced in the report will actually, or part of that will actually be looking about the clarification about awareness and engagement. So the thought is although for this particular analysis, the results are what they are. Going forward, actually, is there anything that funds can do in the way that they try and engage with their members to make things maybe clearer to a particular group of people? Are we being as clear as we can be? Are we giving all the options and that type of thing? So we'll obviously bring something back to you on that. And if there's anything we can do as a fund, as advised by SAB at that point. 3.4, the care evaluation, just a follow-up point on that. This was reported at the last committee to say that the regulations were in force, came in force on 31st of March on that. So really, from our point of view, we are now at a point where we need to apply these changes. So the 9th of June is when the care revaluation updates will be applied to our system, and that we will basically apply the remedy for that for the people affected. Under section 3.5, policies and strategies. So as you'll remember, in March, we changed and approved a review cycle. So the new review process is that the committee will review every 3 years, with officers conducting an annual review unless there's something that needs being brought prior to that. Obviously, what we didn't want to do is for the committee to lose any oversight over those changes. So what we've done in section 3.5 is provided the detail of what we believe are immaterial changes that we would like to apply to the policies after this meeting. And if you're in agreement with and happy for us to do that, we will go ahead and publish those policies. But we just wanted to leave the governance transparency trail in there, so you have got an opportunity to look at those first. And final comment, it was just under 3.6 and the skills and knowledge opportunities. So since our last meeting, we are now live on the online training platform. I'm hoping everybody has received their login details, but please let me know if you haven't. What the plan is now at this stage, if everybody that should have them can just make sure they can log in, get familiar with the system and that type of thing. And if you want to undertake any training, obviously, please feel free to do so. But at the July meeting, what we'll do is we'll bring the training strategy, and part of that will be to agree the terms of that training to make sure that we're all comfortable with the timescales and the frequency that we're asking for that training to be undertaken by everybody. But that's everything in the report, unless there's any questions.
Members, any questions, any points of clarification you'd like? I would just like to say, please all read paragraph 3.6.1, which explains why we're being asked to do the training. Sorry, Andy.
Thanks very much. I'm hesitating to ask this question, but large IT infrastructure projects run by government don't always run smooth, and this clearly is another one under the dashboard program. I suppose my concern is when we get to the stage of rollout, do you know yet whether there's going to be a period where any bugs in the system are going to be found before it starts to impact on delivery of the service to our members? I'm just a little bit concerned that there may not be all the protections in place just in case the thing was to go pear-shaped.
So from what I understand, the first kind of prior to where we are now, there was already some testing taking place on the dashboards. So part of that early testing has already been done by some schemes, and I can only assume that maybe something has come out of that in terms of that initial testing and why we have the delay. So I think what's going to happen now is obviously there is this pause so that the system can be absolutely as good as it can be. I'm also aware that we have been kind of advised that when we will be given sufficient notice as well when the new connection deadlines are issued. But any more than that, I don't know, Mark, if you know any more. I just know that they are doing testing as part of the overall project, and they have invited, there was some initial participants, and then there was some additional voluntary, and there were certain stages that they were going through. So I'm absolutely confident that they're checking all those stages, and the fact that actually there is a pause is probably reassuring that they are actually addressing anything that they're not comfortable with.
Yeah, I think recognising the dashboards for what they are is probably important because ultimately they provide a very light level of detail about a member's benefits. And so if a member wants to understand, all the different options as to when they can retire and what they will get at different times, the only way to do that is through our member self-service. So we very much see this as a means for improving the take up on that as the profile is raised. In terms of the concerns around what does the dashboard mean for us, I think the biggest concern we have is the partial matches. So an individual is going to try to find their benefits, and it's if it comes back with a match, it's fine. We can set the data sent automatically. It's where it comes back with a partial match that's where there's going to be activity for the fund. And so getting the matching right and making sure you're only getting the matches coming through that you want is the absolute critical part of this, and where we'll be spending our time. Taking account, I think it's fair to say, of the very clear advice that's coming out of various parties, including PASA, who do a lot for the fund. So that's the bit we're really concentrating on, and the other bit we're really concentrating on, of course, is obviously the data quality. The actual mechanics, we're obviously, in terms of how you connect to the dashboard, it's through your software platform who need to have a sort of integrated service provider solution for the actual connection itself. And so that's something that we've got within our procurement that we're undertaking at the moment. Is that helpful? Yeah.
Appreciate you can't predict the future. Really great accuracy, but no, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Members, are there any other points? See nothing in the room. So we're being asked two things here. First is to note the governance and compliance report, but also note the immaterial amendments to be applied to the policies in section 3.5.2. And just want to highlight that to make sure we're clear. And are we happy to take those both together and approve both of those items? Thank you very much, members. In which case we'll move on to item 7. It's a report on employer admissions and cessations. Can I ask Corey Blows, the Employer Services Manager, to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. The report this time is just a report for noting there are no decisions required from the committee from this particular report. I'll summarise the report. I do have 2 corrections to make and 1 update on one of the cases to give as well. So the main the report is giving you an update on 3 admissions into the scheme. These are all transferee admission bodies that have agreed to sign up to the admission agreements. So there's no discretion around allowing or denying their entry into the fund. The report also provides details on 11 bodies that have ceased in the fund across 13 different admission agreements. And it gives an update on previous cessations as well. In terms of the updates that I have, in section 5 of the report on page 69, Serco should not be named in that part. The case that we've got there is still going under the determination process for the surplus. So I took it out of the report until we've got that full answer for you. So that note there that is going to be talked about later on in the report should have also been deleted. In Appendix A on page 72 as well, there is a typo under the entry for Rapid Grantor. It mentions an admission agreement with Aspins. That should say Rapid, not Aspins. And then in terms of an update, on page 74 in Appendix B, there is the case of Chorus Homes. It says that the calculation is underway. We've had the calculation results for that cessation now. The employer fell within the cessation corridor, so there's no payment required out of the fund or into the fund from the exit employer as well, so they can just walk away. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions or give any clarifications required on the report.
Members, over to you. Any questions on this? Seems relatively straightforward. In which case, are we happy to note the admissions and the cessations en bloc, and the update to the collection of exit payments and assessment of exit credits on previously ones? Happy to do so. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 8 then, which is the cash management strategy. I'm going to ask Mark to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. And I believe Ben Barlow, the investment and accounting lead, is online as well, in case there are any difficult questions from members. Yeah, so this report is, or this policy strategy is being brought back to you because it's now needs a full review of your scrutiny. Although, as you'll see from section 3.1, the changes are fairly light. Obviously, there is a change. There's been a change of bank. There's no LGSSs are no more, and we also brought in, I'm thinking, refunds. Refunds are very small cash flows, but there's quite a few of them each year, so they should have been referenced in the report as well. So the changes are, as I say, set out in section 3.1. The strategy mainly deals with, as you would expect, the flows of cash through the various accounts, which are local, the various NatWest accounts, and to the custodian. I think the key thing about the whole of the cash flow is the timing, in terms of the main monies come in with the contribution flows in from scheme employers by around the 19th of the month. And the main cash flow we have out regularly is obviously the pension payroll, which is at the end of the month. But other than that, I think as I say, the changes are fairly light, but it did need your scrutiny. Happy to take any questions on it.
Members, do you have any questions, Adela?
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered why the change of bank. Is there a problem with Barclays, or?
No, I think it's just the expiry of a contract and the change to NatWest, which obviously that's not driven by the fund. That's what generally is happening with the actual the council itself is looking to change its bank, and so if we are part of that council, so we move with them, but Ben was part of that project.
Okay, thank you.
Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I did just wonder if the risk register might benefit from having the kind of likelihood and impact assessed in there as well. I think at the moment it provides the risk, the implications and the mitigations, but it isn't easy to see from that how significant the risk might be.
Sorry, you mean so in every report we do, we always just put what risks relate to the report, but the risk register itself is obviously always separately addressed.
I think it was on page 84 in the strategy. It's got operational issues and a table with the risks, implications and mitigations.
Okay.
I am aware on the risk register does cover those aspects as well.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, obviously the problem with strategy is if you have something which is dynamic, in terms of scoring or RAG statistics, for example, you'd have to be repeatedly updating your strategy, which is why we tend to deal with risks through a separate process. So what we're effectively doing is identifying those risks, and any of the key risks of the fund should be within the registering, albeit they can sometimes be more granular and things like this. So I think the intention not to score is intentional,
Yeah.
but I'm open to discussion.
Yeah, I take the point as part of the strategy. And I mean, perhaps a line reference in that, that the risks are managed through a risk register.
Sure.
That, yeah.
Okay. We can update that, please.
Andy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested in the overdraft facility and whether it's actually being used. I appreciate it's there for managing day-to-day issues of money supply, but just to have some idea about its use.
I believe it's incredibly infrequent, but I'll hand over to Ben.
Yeah, hopefully you can all hear me. Yeah, so the way it works, we've got there's 3 accounts with NatWest, and then there's one overriding account, and a sweep happens to move money at the end of each day into that sort of overarching account. So there's a pensioner payroll, there's a payroll account, a payables account, and a receivables account, put simply. And then over the top, there's an overarching account that resets balances at the end of the day to £10,000. There's usually enough, or there's always enough in that overarching account to avoid any need to duck into overdrafts. And obviously we do work daily to keep track of estimates and real actual figures to make sure we know exactly what's coming in. And if there is any expectation something might drop below, we will make sure we've got liquidity within the fund to move something back so we avoid any overdraft or overdraft fees. That's not to say we haven't got an overdraft, but that is very much used as a safety blanket. And it's not something we have gone into in a long time.
Members, any other questions on this item? Okay, in which case we are asked to approve the updates to the cash management strategy that's set out there. Are we happy to do so? Yeah, thank you very much. Move on to item 9, which is the committee agenda plan. Officers, do you have any comments or updates on this?
No further comments, thank you.
Okay. Members, any questions or comments on the agenda plan? If not, are we happy to note the committee agenda plan? Yeah, thank you very much. Right, move on to item 10. In order to discuss the following items, we need to move the meeting into private session, excluding the press and publics. Committee is asked to resolve that the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the following 2 items contain exempt information under paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed. Information related to financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Members, do you agree with this proposal? Thank you. As this is the final public item on the agenda, I would like to express my thanks to those members of the public and press who have taken time to watch the meeting today via the Council's website. The broadcast will now end